presents dementia differently. We cannot do cookie cutter care. We can't do one size fits all. We must take this information and customize everybody's care approach. And the other thing that is so necessary is we educate the family as well. Do you see that the families who have this information, that's like gold to us. They will truly be singing out of the same hymn book, I like to say, the same dementia hymn book. When they call and say, you know, Susie, Cheerful, your caregiver today, she couldn't get mom to bathe. We're going to say, well, sometimes we can. Sometimes we have to choose our battles and change our strategies according to where that person is with dementia. We never make promises that we can stop, change, or fix a behavior because everyone is different. We have certain ways to manage it, and we want to let that family member know we're going to work on finding a way to manage that, but we all have to work together. And there's so many moving parts. We can't put one thing on one person. We must learn to expect symptoms and challenging behaviors. When I'm working with family members, often they'll say, well, Dad doesn't wander. He has a little short-term memory loss, but he doesn't wander. I'll say, yet. He doesn't wander yet. Because we looked at where those holes were happening all over the brain. Just because he's not wandering now doesn't mean that tomorrow, in the blink of an eye, he has a hole in that map, that guidance system, and suddenly he's confused and wandering. We expect it. We expect that we're going to see challenging behaviors because everybody is different. And we're going to see agitation and restlessness and paranoia. There's certain things we cannot change. We're going to see what we call sundowner syndrome, but I'm going to give you some ways to help that family and our caregivers manage that in the home. Because there are ways to lessen that a little bit, to manage it, and we'll talk about that. So we expect challenging behaviors. That's part of dementia care. It's going to happen. So we're ready for it. That way it doesn't surprise us because otherwise we can get into some serious dangerous situations. But to better help you understand what I'm talking about with dementia is the loss of normal brain function. Something has to be causing that to happen. These are dementia symptoms telling us that's happening. I want you to understand how complex normal brain function is. Because, for example, when we hear something, that is a normal brain function, to hear it, to physically hear it. But there are hundreds of normal brain functions that have to go along with that. Because when we hear something, we also have to process what it is we're hearing, what it means to us, and what we're going to do about it. So what do you do next if you hear something? And the same thing with sight. When you see something, you have to process what it is you're seeing, and it's not just one thing, it's many. Then you have to process what it is you see, what you're going to do about it, what does that mean to you? So let's talk about that because it's many more brain functions than you actually realize. It's unbelievable how many because we do it all on autopilot without thinking about it. So I want you to answer this question, just a guess. How many normal brain functions do you have to access in the first 10 seconds when the alarm goes off in the morning? Somebody give me a guess, just a guess. 10. That is very conservative, but a good guess. Now let me tell you why 10 is very conservative. Because, like I said, we do this all on autopilot. We don't realize how many normal brain functions it takes for us to do anything. And we have to access normal brain function to do anything, okay? So let's just say we're sleeping. Let's break this down for a minute. The alarm goes off. What's the first normal brain function you access?
Open your eyes.
Open your eyes is coming, but something else happens first.
Oh, you're hearing the
You
alarm.
hear the alarm. You physically hear it. But you also, at the same time, have to access that understanding, that processing, that executive thinking. What's that sound? What does it mean to me? And what am I going to do next? That's the alarm. It's time to wake up. Now you have to process, what are you going to do next? So you might want to access some other normal brain functions so that you can decide. You have to have more information to decide, to process what it is you want to do with the information that the alarm's going off, okay? So that's more normal brain function right there. So what's the next thing you might want to do? You just said it.
Open your eyes.
And you open your eyes. What that means to you is you open your eyes so you can access the next normal brain function of sight. You have to physically open your eyes, which is hundreds of normal brain functions, by the way. Think about how many muscles and nerves it takes to do that. You open your eyes, you access sight. When you access sight, do you just see one thing? You see a lot. You have to process what is important to you. Right now, you're paying attention to me. You are watching me and watching the screen. You're not watching that door. You're not watching this table, but it's still within your sight. Are you processing that? You process what is important to you in the moment, but you're still processing all this other stuff at the same time. Hundreds of normal brain functions. So you open your eyes, you see that the light is streaming in from the windows. It's morning, the alarm's going off, it's time to wake up. So now you need to make some decisions based on that information. So you might want to look at the clock. In order to look at the clock, you have to move. Movement is more normal brain function, hundreds of muscles, nerve endings. You fire that off, you look at the clock, it's 5 minutes to 7. You process what that means to you when you access sight. It is 5 minutes to 7 in the morning. I don't have to hear that dementia whisper until 2:30 this afternoon. I can hit the snooze button. That is a lot more processing. Hundreds of more brain functions we have to access to make that decision. Anytime you hear a question or an option, you're processing more to make a decision. So hundreds of normal brain functions. Not just yet, you want to hit the snooze button. You've decided that with the information. You reach over to hit that snooze button. When you do, you pull your arm out from underneath those covers and your nerve endings, your skin processes there is a change of temperature in that room. It is cooler. So you feel that, you process that, you hit that snooze button, you get all nice and comfy and you go back to sleep. Do you think it was a few more normal brain functions than 10? How many? Would you say hundreds?
100, yeah.
Okay. So if that's true, it took us hundreds of normal brain functions in the first 10 seconds when the alarm goes off to make that decision to go back to sleep. In 15 minutes, that alarm's going to go off again, and we're going to make some more decisions. How many normal brain functions do you think you have to access in a 24-hour period to exist as a human? Would you say millions? Billions, probably. Think about that. Because in 15 minutes when that alarm goes off, you're going to have to get up. So that's a lot of brain function. Getting up. You have to decide what you're going to wear. You have to get dressed. Make a meal. Decide what you're going to eat. Make a meal. Eat it. How many normal brain functions does it take to drive a car? My goodness. Millions. Some of us have more of that than others, too. Do you agree? So, millions of normal brain functions, and most of that, the most important part that ties it all together is not hearing, it's not seeing, it's not moving, it's processing why we do this, what is our next step, what the information the world gives us, what we're going to do with it. It's that processing. And that's the normal brain function that most people with dementia lose the most. So they can hear, but they can't necessarily do anything about it, so it looks like they can't hear. So they can see, but they can't necessarily process that, so it looks like they can't see. That's our most difficult challenge. So the causes of dementia symptoms, it's like this dirty rat. And I want you to now think of that person with a cause of dementia. Their brain is beginning to look like a piece of Swiss cheese, because that's pretty much what that picture looked like, random holes in random cheese, right? And this dirty little rat, he's the diagnosis. We'll call him Mr. Alzheimer's today. Mr. Alzheimer's is in that person's brain. We don't know how he got there. We don't know how to get him out. We can't stop him from running around and eating cheese. And that's his life's work. He runs around and he grabs cheese and leaves holes. So that person's brain who's affected like that from a permanent and progressive cause like Alzheimer's, they will continue to have more and more dementia symptoms in more and more different places in their brain. We have no way to stop it, change it, or fix it. Physically, it is gone. So all we can do is help them manage it. Keep them safe. But there's so many things we cannot give back to them, and it is so helpful for the family member to understand that. We're not there to stop it. We're going to talk about that here in a little while. Okay, so look at all those holes. When that person goes to access normal brain function, it's a roll of the dice, whether they will hit cheese or a hole. When they hit cheese, they look, act, and feel normal. That's what's so insidious about dementia. Mom looks pretty good today. Well, she was pretty bad yesterday. Well, this morning, cheese or whole, or cheese or whole, or cheese or whole. We have no control. And what is even worse for that person whose brain is affected like this, there's no pain sensors in that brain. So they don't feel any different. Whether they hit cheese or a hole, they still think they're normal. That's why one of the most difficult symptoms we will have almost always is they are resistant to our care. We cannot train you, the caregiver, to go out on the first day and treat that person like they have a normal brain. It is so unfair for us to send Susie Cheerful, our caregiver, out there, say, oh, you've got this new client, Mrs. Smith. She has a little dementia, but her daughter wants us to come and help and be a companion to her and help with some chores around the house because she is a little bit lonely in her dementia. Okay, so can we send them out to knock on the door and say, hi, Mrs. Smith, I'm Susie Cheerful from Comfort Keepers. I'm here to help you in your dementia. What's Mrs. Smith going to tell her?
I don't need help.
I don't need that. I don't have dementia. You've been talking to my daughter. She thinks I'm crazy. There's a physical reason why they feel that way, and we cannot change it. They do not know what they do not know. And we cannot reason with them because that very portion of their brain that processes our words and our reasoning is no longer working. So we must learn to do what I call creative interventions. We must learn to get in that home without letting Mrs. Smith know we are there for her dementia because she will never believe us and she'll never let us in. That, my friends, is a very special key to the treasure chest. And I can give some wonderful examples. We'll talk about that here in a little while of what I call creative interventions. But let's talk about this list and then we'll take a real quick break. Okay, so when we have a hole in the part of the cheese of our brain, of our cheese, that is our memory storage, what is the dementia symptom we're going to see? Memory loss. The memory is affected. Now, often it is affected with their most current memories being affected first. So they lose their most current memories, but their long ago memories stay longer. They're protected longer because of where they are in the brain. So those holes start with the most current memories. So often families will say to me, oh no, mom has a great memory. Ask her about her wedding 60 years ago and she can tell you every single fact about that. Now ask her what she had for breakfast this morning. What will she say to you? I didn't eat, I don't know, I wasn't hungry, because there is a hole in that file. It's gone. Can we give it back to her? Will mom remember? We'll talk about that here. Confusion and disorientation. There is a hole, a gap in the compass, navigator, guidance, map system of their brain. The very system that you access hundreds of normal brain functions to find your way up the stairs and into this room and orient yourself to this screen. You had to access many normal brain functions to do that, but you did it all on autopilot. Let's just say you drove here, you had some cause of dementia, you had a little bit of symptoms, but you drove here today, you parked your car. When you got out of your car, you suddenly had a hole in that portion of your brain. You would not be able to find your way up here. But there's two things that scare me about that. You would be wandering around out by your car, and if we walked up to you and said, are you okay? Do you need something? What would you say if you had dementia? No, I'm fine. Because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so it would appear that you were okay, which they can do. They access what I call your hostess cheese. Everybody learns a processing ability called hostess facade, hostess cheese. And we learn that from the time we're very little. For example, Cindy, if I walked up to you right now and said, how are you? What's your first response?
Fine.
Yes. Because you only tell me what you think I want to hear because you don't feel like that is, I really need more information. That's your hostess cheese. You'd say fine with a smile, even if your life sucked. You'd say fine. We do that, right? Somebody with dementia does that because they don't know what they don't know. So if we ask them, do you need help? What do they say to us? No, I'm fine. Because they honestly feel that, okay? They access that hostess cheese. So that scares me. But what really scares me even more is you have dementia, you are losing normal brain function, you're showing symptoms, suddenly you can't find your way up here, orient yourself to the screen, but you drove here And in the blink of an eye, you could lose the normal brain function to safely drive that car. But right now, you still have the cheese to start the car, to steer the car, to get yourself from